Hey guys, so this is our first lecture for Chapter 8. So we covered 8.1 and 8.2 after our test last time we met face-to-face. So this series is going to cover 8.3 module, which has to do with personality. So again, middle adulthood, we're still talking about early to mid-40s to mid-60s. There's a lot of life events that change during this age group. So personality changes can occur as well. Keep in mind, changes having to do with family life, career life, social life as well occur. And that can really impact how one sees themselves in relation to others as well. So within this module, we have to first talk about the differences between normative crisis models and life events models in regards to how our personality changes. So normative crisis models are based on kind of universal normal behavior, what we would consider to be normal behavior for a particular age group. So there are a lot of stage theorists that go with the normative crisis models. So Erickson, he's one of those, and we'll talk about his stage in just a second, as well as we'll talk about Gould and Levinson's theories on normative stage developmental personality-wise. And then you have life events model. So the explanation of how just life events occur. So there are some critics for both of them. So with the normative crisis model, a lot of people say that they're kind of outdated and that they limit the impact that gender roles play in regards to how people develop differently for different stages in their life, and especially men versus women. So also, when you talk about the differences, life events models talk about a specific time that most people will get married or most people have babies, things like that. So if a woman had her baby at 21, she would experience the same psychological forces as a woman having her first baby at 39. And of course, proponents of both models agree that adulthood is a time of growth. There's a substantial amount of growth that happens in adulthood. So with the life events model, we see where, especially if we're given the example of having children, you know, there's a continuation of having children. More and more women are waiting until after their 20s and into their mid to late 30s to have babies, where 10, 20 years ago, women were having babies much earlier into their 20s. So that shift, there's been that shift and change of when certain life events occur. You can think about it with marriage as well. More and more people are waiting to get married until their mid-20s, late 20s, versus 20 years ago when it was normal for people to still get married right out of high school or at least into their early 20s. So that's the differences between normative crisis models, what's kind of the normal universal behavior within a group, and life events model. When do certain life events occur and those changes? So Erickson's stage of generativity versus stagnation. So with this stage, people have to look at how productive have they been and are they okay with that productivity. In your 40s and into your 60s, there's not a whole lot of time to change careers. In the early 40s, we see a lot more people changing careers because they feel like there's still a lot of productive time going on. Whereas people are in their 60s, you don't see a lot of shifts in career changes because they are coming to the end of their work life. So what are they leaving behind for future generations? What are they leaving behind for their families, their co-workers, things like that? What positive impact are they making for people? That kind of legacy that they're looking at and how they are leaving that for other people as well comes into play. Stagnation. People just kind of look at what they haven't done. Their limited list, if you will. Whereas they feel that since they haven't contributed much, their life really wasn't worth that much as well. the minimal contributions that they have made, they don't feel are really important either. So it's kind of that heavy balance between the two of being fulfilled in what you have accomplished and not feeling like you haven't made a difference either. So those two things come into play. So George Vaillant, he's another one of what we call these stage theorists. So he says keeping the meaning versus rigidity. So it occurs usually between age 45 to 65. Adults seek meaning by accepting their strengths and weaknesses of others. So rigid adults become more isolated from others. Kind of think of, the grumpy old man, if you will. If, grandpa, doesn't want to see other people's viewpoints and always is negative, a lot of people are not going to want to be around grandpa. And so you have these people in your careers and your families that they, don't want to change their viewpoints for other people. So a lot of people are not going to want to be around them. Whereas, looking at their strengths and changing those if they need to, and changing their weaknesses will allow more people to become accustomed to their way of thoughts and to feel like they have personal meaning in their life. So Roger Gould, he says that adults pass through different stages, through different time periods. So people in their 30s and 40s, of course, they want to get that career, have that family. So there's kind of that urgency to accomplish life goals because time is slowly starting to run out. There's not a whole lot of research, of course, with these stage theorists, because if you think about it, not all cultures have these stages. They think differently about growing and maturing and getting older. So different life events don't naturally occur through all cultures, and we need to keep that in mind as well. So just here's the summary of Gould's transitions in adulthood. 16 to 18, leave home, terminate parental control. 18 to 22, leave the family and begin becoming more focused on their peers. This is when adults kind of move in with their friends for a few years before they get married. Stage 3, 22 to 28, people become more independent and commit to their career and then have families and children. Stage 4, 29 to 34, they kind of question themselves and they may experience some confusion as to, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? I'm really not sure. So that ambivalence as far as their career goals can come into play. And then stage 5, 35 to 43, they feel that urgency. If I don't do this now, when am I ever going to do it? So they have to look at their life goals. And then 43 to 53, settle down, kind of accept their life, things like that. And then stage 7, 53 to 67, or 53 to 60, people grow more tolerant and more accepting of their past mistakes and realize that, hey, it's okay if I didn't accomplish everything that I wanted to. I can still live a productive life. So Daniel Levinson, he comes in with the seasons of life theory. It kind of builds on all the other stage theorists. So his theory really deals with men and that kind of midlife crisis that we see in those 40s kind of happen. But it really doesn't touch on women, so that's a big limitation to that. So around 40 to 45, we have this midlife transition. Men focus on the finite nature of life, what's its meanings, the questionings of life, things like that. They realize they can't accomplish everything they've ever wanted to. So some men kind of alter their goals and try to relive their younger lives in hopes that they could accomplish other goals that they think are important. And then, of course, we have the midlife crisis. Again, not a whole lot of research validity that goes into this because he focused just on men. And culturally speaking, we don't see this across all cultures as well. It's not strictly universal. So there's the midlife crisis, reality or a myth. Won't spend too much time on that, but you can go and look through that as well. So cultural dimensions, it doesn't really exist. Middle age really is a cultural construct. A lot of people experience middle age and measure middle age based on personal responsibilities, not what you have accomplished. So you need to keep that in mind as well, that it is a cultural construct. It doesn't really exist everywhere. So think about those differences as well. So stability versus change in personality. So a lot of psychologists kind of debate whether our personality characteristics stay stable across our whole life, or is there a lot of change with that? So Erickson and Levinson, if you go back to their theories, they suggest that our personality changes, substantially. But again, you got to look at environment, power of the situation, genetics, things like that. Paul Costa and Robert McCrae, they did the Big Five personality characteristics. They say that our personality pretty much remains mostly stable across the lifespan. So there's not a whole lot of changes to that. So the Big Five, like we talked about, some traits are more changeable than others. And again, here's just a quick review of the Big Five. You have, of course, neuroticism, extroversion, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. And your book goes a little bit more in depth with those. So I would go back and look at that part as you're reading as well, and you can add to it. Happiness across the lifespan. Your book mentions how married couples, unmarried couples, how we see happiness, life satisfaction, how we measure life satisfaction in different systems as well. So 30% of people polled, according to your textbook, report that they are very happy. But of course, you have to look at that in regards to different constructs as well. What one culture may consider to be happy, another culture doesn't. So you really have to look at those cultural variations as well. So here just kind of shows you the stability of personality over time as well for genders in regards to different personality characteristics. Here we're showing neuroticism, how it kind of stays pretty constant, extroversion, and then openness as well. So that's going to be it for this particular lecture. I'm going to pause and then pick up with the second part in regards to relationships in middle age.